Well, thank you so much, Rishi, for transforming the art of stand-up comedy into sit-down Zoom comedy. And I think for that, he deserves a round of applause. So please unmute yourself and give it up for Rishi.
That's yes.
Woo! All right. Our next performer is going to be sharing her poetry. Yashi-Samrendra is an Indian-American writer currently working at Her Campus Media and publishing her poetry on social media. She recently started her own interview series called Quarantine Catch-Up, and for the first episode, she interviewed Vyasar from Indian Matchmaking. Yashi hopes to publish her own poetry book and pursue writing in her future. So, without further ado, Yashi, everybody.
Hi guys, I hope you are all having a great day. I have also never performed on Zoom before, so this is new to everyone. I started off by having a really good morning, and I've been looking forward to the show for the past week, so I'm glad that we could all be here. And how funny was Rishi that, okay, anyways. Yeah, so I wanted to start by introducing myself, and I didn't know what was the best way to go about doing that. And I thought of something that I did in elementary school. So when I was in first grade, my teacher assigned us this activity, and she told us to do an I am poem, which is just a poem made of I statements. It's really just you telling people about yourself. And at first I was like, I haven't done that since I was 7. But then it just felt like the most comprehensive way to give you guys some insight into my personality. So I decided to write one of those this morning. So I am Yashi-Samrendra. I am a student at UC Berkeley. I am an Indian immigrant, but most importantly, I am an artist. I love rainy days and paintings by Degas. I love political debates and hot chocolate in December. I love Frank Sinatra and Harry Potter on ABC. I despise realism and green beans. I dream of the New York skyline constantly. I wonder about human anatomy and the fashion industry. I am Yashi-Samrendra, and I am made from love, art, and curiosity. So that's just a little bit about me. And in a different setting, I would love to get to know you guys too, but unfortunately over Zoom, we can't do that. So instead, let's just get started with my poetry. Now, I'm not usually the person who reveals my themes to people. I don't just tell you what my poem is about, because I think that great work should be interpreted by the audience, by the readers. That being said, I will say that this collection that I'm performing is called, or at least I've titled it, Letters to My Younger Self. If I had the knowledge or the life outlook that I have now when I was younger, God, I would be so much more powerful. But you learn your lessons in time, and I'm glad that I've learned these lessons. My first poem is one that I wrote at the beginning of quarantine. I was sitting up at night and I was thinking about how in our day and age, it is so easy to feel so bad about yourself. One scroll on social media and you'll see 20 people that are supposedly have a better life than you, better grades than you, better body than you. And it was when I thought of this that I decided to write this poem that I call When the Moon Goes to Sleep. When the moon goes to sleep, she dreams of flowers reaching towards the sky with lust and birds chirping around them, of caterpillars climbing leaves and butterflies crawling out of cocoons. She dreams of people soaking up her warmth and water glistening. When the moon goes to sleep, she is restless, lost in the thought of how her beauty isn't her own, but a mere reflection, consumed by the fact that even when alone on stage, she is always overshadowed, dreaming of the day that someone desires her as much as they do her counterpart. But what goes unnoticed are the waves that are drawn by her every move, the water that reflects her beauty to serve as a constant reminder, the couples that wait for her to come out so they can dance in her light. She doesn't seem to hear the love songs that musicians sing to her, the portraits that painters paint for her, the poetry that I write for her. She desires to be someone else, someone that isn't ignored. But she fails to see that while some may be blind to her beauty, the waves don't blink in her presence. While some may sleep through her rain, others rise just to see it. She fails to see herself, and all the music, paintings, and poetry in the world cannot change that unless she chooses to open her eyes. So I wrote this poem because, I don't know, it just baffles me that we're so quick to compare ourselves to one another. And I personally would not be very shocked if the moon herself was comparing to the sun. So now moving on to my next poem. This is one that I think a lot of my friends at college can relate to. I actually came up with the idea for this poem when I was listening to a podcast. It's NPR's Hidden Brain series, and the episode was titled Just Sex. And the episode's super interesting because the narrator is this Indian uncle named Shankar Vedantam, and he goes into the detrimental effects of college hookup culture. So it's almost like your parents are lecturing you. But he listed these effects, and I don't know, I kind of got caught up in thinking about evaluating how I approach romantic relationships. And that is when I wrote this next poem called My Poems with Hookup Culture. You know the number of moles on her back, but not the number of siblings she has. You've seen all of her bumps and her bruises, but know none of the stories behind them. You know how to satisfy her, but not what makes her happy. You've spent so much time fighting intimacy, and you've done it with the most intimate thing there is. Is it worse to feel used or to feel unwanted? So I wrote this poem because I personally think that a lot of our society has become turning personal and really deep relationships into super impersonal. It's like we've taken the most intimate relationships in our society and we've just turned them into the equivalent of being strangers with someone, which is really weird. But and this question of, is it worse to feel used or to feel unwanted? It's jarring and unsettling. And I hope that maybe you guys will also go down the rabbit hole of reevaluating the way you guys approach romantic relationships like I did after listening to that podcast. So now my last poem is one that is very, very close to my heart. When I started publishing my poetry on social media, it was one of the most nerve-wracking moments of my life. I had never been so vulnerable and so open with people before. I'm pretty open with my friends, but to do it on social media, it's a lot scarier. It's a lot more intimidating. And all the poems that you will see on my social media, all the poems that you will hear tonight / have heard tonight, they're all pages from my journal. They're all written from ashes of low points in my life. And so to say that, to put that out there for everyone to read and to promote it, it was scary, if I'm being honest. And I don't know, I realized after a couple poems in, and it took me a while to get used to it, that being vulnerable and being open on social media is one of my best attributes. And I hope that if my readers don't take away the message that I intended for the poem, that's fine. That's another topic. Poetry is meant to be interpreted by the audience, like I said. But if there's one thing that I want all of my readers to take away from my poetry, it's that being vulnerable is a good thing. And I hope that my work inspires people to feel comfortable in sharing their highs and their lows. So this last poem is called A Day at the Museum. It's easier to be silent. Closed books don't know the pain of being tossed away. A light can't be dimmed if it's off in the first place. It's easier to be shut, locked like a drawer, hidden in the basement. Feelings collecting dust, sitting there, never changing. It's easier to be closed. Emotions turn into memorabilia, souvenirs collected from each experience in life. It's easier to be voiceless because the day you open yourself up, people marvel at the pieces, they admire the intricacies, but then they leave, they always leave. After all, you don't spend all day at the museum and you never visit again. This last poem is so close to me because I think that vulnerability shouldn't be a weakness. I think we should be raw and open with people. It makes you more relatable. And like I said, I hope that if there's one thing people take from my poetry, it's that you shouldn't be afraid to be vulnerable. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you to Asha for this amazing platform and for this really cool cause. And I look forward to seeing the last performance of the night. Thank you so much for listening.
Yay, Yashi!
Thank you so much, Yashi, for sharing your poetry with us. And as you said, it's definitely easier to be silent, but let's rise to the challenge and once again give Yashi another round of applause. Last but not least, we have Lost on Track, written and performed by magician and my good friend Sanjeev Vinod. And to introduce the show, I'm passing it to the show's director, Gonzalo Souza.